In order to begin, we're going to have to make a new document. In order to do this, you can click either 1 or Enter if New Document is selected. Now you're going to have a list of options. You're going to choose the very first one that says Add Calculator. Now, you're going to hit Menu, 9 to go to Functions and Programs, click Enter, and click Enter again. That should get you to a screen that looks like this. Once you're at this screen, you're going to name your file distquad, because we're going to be using the distance formula and the quadratic formula. Then you're going to click Enter, and you're going to see something that looks like this. This is the program editing screen. From here, we're going to be typing our code into the right side, and we'll be testing it on the left side. To begin, we're going to type in LBL, which stands for label, space ST. What this is doing is it's creating a label that our project can reference. Labels are used for jumping around your program, and that's how we're going to choose whether we're going to do distance or quadratic. Next, we're going to have RequestStr. This is requesting a string. In most programming languages, a series of characters or letters and numbers are called strings. So it's going to look something like this. RequestStr, space. Now you're going to click Control, and on the multiplication symbol, right above it, it's going to show a little quotation mark symbol. So once Control is selected, if you hit that symbol, you'll open quotation marks. Now we're going to write dist or quad. What this is saying is once you see a prompt screen for what you should type in, which is what RequestString does, or RequestStr, that's the text it's going to say. And that's going to prompt you whether you should say dist or quad, so you know what you're supposed to type. And we have to store that now. In order to store that, we're going to have a comma, t. So this variable t is automatically a string, because that's how we initialized it. So once you answer the question, it's going to be stored as t. But now we have to check what is t. So we're going to type in if. One of the fundamentals of programming is the idea of an if statement. It's checking if something is true. So if we type if t equals, then get back to those quotation marks from earlier, dist, D-I-S-T, then we're going to click Enter. So this is our first block statement. We're going to type space, and then Goto, and the label for the distance formula is just going to be DI. It's easier to use DI than dist because it's shorter, and you don't have to type as many letters over and over again. And when you're programming on a calculator, it's very irritating to type. So then we have to do else. And then once again, first of all, make sure that there's no space here. Then we're going to click Enter, space, and now we're going to have another if statement. This time it's going to say if t equals, open quotation marks, quad, then make sure you're out of those quotation marks and type in then. Then you're going to do Enter, you're going to type in a space, and you're going to do Goto, space, QU. Once again, this is shorthand for quad. What these two statements are doing is checking what that variable t is. So, if when you're prompted with the question dist or quad, you said dist, it's going to go to the label di. But if you typed in quad, it's going to go to the label QU. But what happens if someone accidentally types something that's not one of those two answers? We have to make it prompt someone to go back to the original. So that's why we had that label st, because now we can type in else, and now we can enter and then do a space. And we're going to type in Goto st. You don't have to put any conditions for else, because it's checking if any of the previous conditions have been met. And if they have been met, then you'll never call the else statement. So now we're going to type enter. And when you're coding, you have to do EndIf. And we're going to have to do this twice because we had two if statements. This lets the calculator know that nothing you type after this is part of the if statement. Now we have to do our first label. So label QU. As you might be able to guess, this means that we're about to start programming our quadratic function. So the way we're going to request is you do request space quotation marks A, and we're going to put a little question mark. To do this, you hit this symbol right next to the G, and then just click enter. After that, you have to do a comma, and we're going to call this one A. The same way that we made the string before, we made an integer here. Unlike a string, an integer only can contain numbers. And we're going to do this a few more times because we need to get 3 variables. Next, we're going to have request space B question mark and then once again comma, but this time B. And one more time we're going to have request quotation marks C. And then comma C. So, now we have our 3 variables. We have A, B, and C. When working with the quadratic formula, those are the only 3 numbers you need. But you have to remember that there are 2 possible outcomes for the quadratic formula. There's plus, and then there's minus. For this, we're going to have 2 separate possible answer variables. And we're going to type it like this. We're going to make a fraction, so control, and then do the divide key. Now you can see we have 2 sides, so we'll start on the top. You're going to type the negative, and make sure it's this button, not the subtraction button. Negative b, and we'll start with the plus option. Plus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c. And then all of that is going to be over 2 times a. Now, the way we're storing this variable is control, and on top of the var key, it says sto and then a little arrow. That's saying store this variable. And we're going to store it as xa. So it's the first possible answer for your x. And then we're just going to click enter. And now we're going to type in the next possible formula. So we're going to get another fraction. And this time we're going to do negative b minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c, all over 2 times a. And we're going to store this as xb. So we're going to click enter. And now we're going to display this because we have our information. So to do this, you type disp space. We'll put in quotation marks and we're going to say x equals. And then we're going to have another space and a comma. Then after that, we're going to have an A. And then we're going to have, or actually, no, sorry, we're going to have an XA. And then another comma. And we'll go to quotation marks again, and we'll say or, another space, and then a quotation mark, XB. And now we're going to do something else. We're going to do Goto, and we're going to type in end. The end label is going to be used for ending the program, because once you already got your answer, you don't want to go through and have to do the distance formula if you only wanted to do the quadratic formula. And now we're going to make our second label. This is going to be LBL space DI for distance. And we're going to start by requesting variables again. So we're going to type request space quotation marks XA. And you'll notice, even though we're getting a variable XA here, it's not going to interfere with this XA, because they're only going to be running the program for one or the other formula. And once they relaunch the program, they're going to have all of the variables reset, so there's never going to be any interference, even if they have the same variable name. And then we'll do XA, and then we'll do the same thing for XB, YA, and YB. So we'll have request space quotation marks XB question mark comma XB. We'll also have request space quotation marks YA question mark then comma YA, and then request space quotation marks YB question mark comma YB. Okay. So now we've requested all our variables, but we have to do something with it. So we're going to put in the distance formula. So we're going to have radical, then parentheses, XB minus XA squared plus YB minus, actually you have to put parentheses here too, my bad, minus YA squared. And then you're going to store that whole thing as D. So you're going to do the control var again, and then you're going to type in D. Now, we only have 2 more lines of code in the program. It's going to be disp space quotation marks distance equals space. Now you're going to go out of the quotation marks, put a comma, D. And then finally, for the last line of code, you're going to have enter and LBL space end. Now you're going to do control and this little button over here, which will say save over it. And you're going to be able to save it. So we're going to call it distquad. So just type in distquad, and then type enter. And for me, I've already made this before, so it's asking me to overwrite it, so I'm going to click yes. You won't have that issue. And then it's saved. Now you're going to hit menu, and then you're going to hit 2, and then 1. And then control tab is going to take you to that left side. So if I zoom in here onto the screen, we're going to hit this var button right there, and you're going to get this, and you're going to click enter, and you're going to have distquad, then you click enter again, and you're going to be prompted. So let's say I want to do the distance formula, so I'm going to type in dist, I'm going to hit enter. Now once XA, I'll put in a 1, XB, I'll put in a 1, 1, 1, and I hit enter, and it says the distance is 0, which is correct. So now let's run it again. Let's see what happens if I do quad. So I'm going to type in quad, I'm going to hit enter, and I'll also do 1, 1, and 1. So it says there's a non-real calculation. That doesn't mean there's an error in our program. But if you're remembering, we can end up with a negative and a radical, which means we can get complex numbers. So there's no issue. But if you change a mode on your calculator to allow for complex fractions or complex numbers, then there should be no issue. And finally, just to show what happens if I type something random in, I'll click enter. It's going to take us right back there. I'll hit cancel because we don't want to do that. So by now, you should be able to make your own application that does this. And for the next part of the video, I'll be teaching you guys how to put a Game Boy on your calculator. I hope you learned something from the first part, and using these tools and this knowledge, you should be able to do the same thing for any other function and any other system of equations, because all it involves is math and plugging in variables. And now you guys know how to store variables, you know how to create variables, and you know how to prompt the user to enter in data. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to download everything that is in the description below. Once you have that done, you're going to open the TI-Nspire computer link software. The software window is going to look something like this, and on the bottom, if you click that button with your TI-Nspire connected to the computer, it should show up like this. You're going to click select, and then you're going to be able to see all of its files down below. You could go through them, you can look at everything you have, but we're just interested in transferring files from our computer onto here. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to have to downgrade the firmware of our device from version 3.9 to version 3.6. To do that, you're going to open the downgrade fix, and you're going to extract this file. We'll extract it into this folder, because that's where I keep my Nspire files, but you could do it wherever, as long as you know where it is. And now in here, if I refresh, just to refresh this window, you can see I have downgrade fix 39. Now what we're going to do is we're going to take this file here, and we're going to drag it down. Okay. Now what you have to do is you have to disconnect your Nspire from the computer. You should now see on the top left of your device, it says downgrade protection disabled. So you're going to locate it again here, and you're going to click select. Now what we could do is we can go to tools, install handheld lab cradle OS, and you're going to locate the operating system that you downloaded. It should look something like this. And you're going to click install OS, and you're going to click yes. So now it should be installing. What we've done just now is we've tricked the Nspire to think it's getting an upgrade when in reality it's getting a downgrade. Although recently they have released a version of EndIf, which is the software we're about to install, for version 3.9, which is the most recent version of the Nspire firmware, it's still in beta and there's not as many things available. And since what we want is a Game Boy emulator, we have to downgrade it to 3.6. So, once this finishes, I'll show you what to do. Once the file finishes transferring from your computer, it'll say that you can unplug your device. Then you'll get this installing screen. Once this is done, we can proceed to installing EndIf and then the Game Boy emulator. Along with being able to install the Game Boy emulator, there's tons of other awesome programs that you can install on your Nspire that you couldn't do before. After the software finishes installing, you can go ahead and reconnect to your Nspire using the computer link software. locate the download for Endless in your downloads folder and double click on it. We can extract the files to anywhere we want. Once again, I'll use my Nspire folder. And you're going to want to locate 3 things within it. So you're going to go into the calc bin folder, and you're going to see 3 files. So select all of them, and just drag all of them down into there. And they're all going to install. Okay, and now for the next step. Now that we've put the folders on the Nspire, we're going to go into the My Documents folder and locate the Endless installer. You're going to click on this. You're going to see something like this. And it's going to say press menu to install Endless. So you're going to hit this menu key right here. And then this is going to happen. And you're just going to wait. It shouldn't take too long to reappear. And once it does, in the top left corner of your screen, assuming it worked, you're going to see this, Endless installed. And now for the last step, installing the Game Boy emulator. We're going to have to go back to the computer. For the next part, we're going to once again reconnect our calculator. We're going to do 2 things now, although they're mostly for organization. First, we're going to make a new folder, and we're going to call it Endless. We're going to take the 3 files that we installed earlier, and we're going to put them in there. Then we're going to go back out into the general folder. So you can see now there's 2 copies. You can delete these 3, because we only need 1 set of the copies. Now we're going to make 1 more new folder. So we're going to right click again, do new folder. We're going to call this ROMs. Now we're going to go back and we're going to take our GBC for Nspire folder. We're going to drag it into ROMs. Now if you look on your calculator and you go into My Documents, into ROMs, and then open GBC for Nspire, it should say no ROM files found. That's fine. Now you can click escape and go back to your home folder. And we're going to go to a web browser. We're going to go to doperoms.com. Now, we can do Game Boy and Game Boy Color games, so that's what we're going to look at. So you could choose any game you want, and they should all work. There might be a few that don't, but most of them should. So, for our purposes, I'm going to look for Kirby. And I like Kirby's Dream Land, so let's choose that. Now you're going to go down and you're going to click Download ROM. Now you're going to go down again and click Download right here. Once you go here, you're going to take this file, you're going to extract it, and I'm going to extract it to my Nspire folder. Okay. Now we're almost done. But you're going to have to go to your file, which is Kirby's Dream Land. You're going to change this extension and do .tns, and then click Enter. If you change a file name extension, the file might become unusable. You're going to say yes, because you want to change it anyway. I already have this game, so I'm going to say yes, I'm going to replace it. For you, that shouldn't be an issue. So now we have our game file. So what you're going to do is you're going to go back here to your connection software, and in your ROMs folder, you're going to take this, you're going to drag it over, and it's going to install. Now, you're ready to play. The last part of the video will just show that it works. If you go to the My Documents folder, then into ROMs, and then find GBC for Nspire and click on it, you can see all your game files here. I'll select the first one, Kirby's Dream Land. And there we go. Let's hit the start button. And you can see that it works. There are tons of other cool projects and things that you could put on your calculator. You can get a Game Boy Advance emulator. You can get other emulators. You can get all kinds of math applications and other games. I hope you enjoyed the video.